All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to True Correct Loser. I hope you're doing well. So, folks, I got a wild story for you guys today. I'm going to tell you the tale of the Molotov cocktail lawyers. And anyone that's watched this channel closely has heard me reference these two a couple times in regards to the ongoing debate on whether the feds ever put out mugshots. When Ghislaine was arrested and no mugshot came out and no picture of any kind came out, the debate started. That's weird. There's no mugshot. And then myself included, I was made to feel a little bit stupid by the professional journalist when I was waiting to get into Ghislaine's first appearance at the federal courthouse, because they were like, no, hey, calm down there, conspiracy head. The feds never put out mugshots. It's not weird. It's not Epstein didn't kill himself. Just calm down. And then I would always use this, the Molotov cocktail case, as a way to be like, well, the Molotov cocktail lawyers, they had a mugshot come out right away. Federal charges. They were brought to the same jail Ghislaine was in. The only difference I can find is they were charged in the Eastern District of New York, and Ghislaine was charged in the Southern, but I don't think that should make a difference. And so my conclusion on whether the feds put out mugshots or whether they don't, or the whole thing, is the feds can do whatever they want. And that is one of the reasons why I will do everything I can to never be in federal custody or to give over my youth and my fate and my freedom over to the feds. And that was punctuated by my one run-in with the feds ever, which was at the Ghislaine Maxwell hearing. If you remember, I got up at the crack of dawn, went down to the federal courthouse. They were letting 50 people in. I waited all day, finally got in there, was exhausted. I had brought in a sandwich but didn't eat it because the whole day was just so intense trying to get in there to cover the story. Finally, I'm in there. We're in this big federal courtroom. All of the journalist chairs are taped socially distant apart, and I'm sitting there and I'm getting a little lightheaded. I've had the COVID mask on all day, and I haven't eaten, and I'm starting to, and I was like, I just need a good old-fashioned non-mask breath. So I pulled my mask just forward maybe like an inch, took a big breath, and then let it snap back. And just doing that, like I did that, I was watching Ghislaine on the screen, the whole thing. It took, the hearing took forever. So I'm watching Ghislaine on the screen, I just do that. And right when I do that, there was maybe like 8 federal agents up wearing cheap suits, just big East Coast greasy hair, like fat wrist type of guys, And I just did that, and just the timing, right when I did it, I saw a guy that was leaning against the wall, like, pop up. I knew it was for me. I knew I was getting in trouble. I was like, damn, am I getting kicked out, or I'm getting in trouble? And he slowly walked over. So there was all this anticipation of what's happening. I'm still just watching the screen, Ghislaine, trying to just act like, all right, this federal agent is not walking straight towards me. And he gets really close, probably because he didn't want to disrupt everybody listening, but he gets really close and bends all the way down, like where his big federal head is right here. I can either smell his shaving cream or his hair gel or something. And he gets all the way down and he goes, "Keep your mask on," like in that slow voice. And I didn't even look at him. I didn't want to give him that. All I did is go like this. While I was watching the thing, I just went like this. And kept watching, and then he walked back. And just hearing his voice and smelling his cheap shaving cream or whatever it is, I just thought, in regards to Ghislaine, I thought, oh my gosh, I am so glad I am not in federal custody where these people have control over me. I just had this like feeling of like, I get to walk out of there. I'm free. And I think that is one of the most fascinating things about the Molotov cocktail case, and why it was international news. All of the major papers covered it. And there's this feeling that these two that had it all, the American dream, and they just needlessly handed over their entire just youth and freedom and fate over to the feds, like, here you go, and without even accomplishing anything. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. We are going to go back to a birthday party in New York City in 2013, where you got to think two college students. I don't know if they were exactly in college yet, or maybe they were in grad school. But anyway, two college students, birthday party, 2013. Yarouj Rahman and Collinford Mattis come together, and they meet, and they strike up a friendship. They had a lot in common. They both are kids of immigrants. Yarouj comes from a blue-collar Pakistani family in Brooklyn. Collinford comes from a Jamaican immigrant, also in Brooklyn. And so, that's a big thing to connect on. They also went to private high schools. It's like, I always think of that 8 Mile, where Eminem's doing the battle in 8 Mile, where he's like, claims to be a gangster, his real name's Clarence, or he went to a private school, and everyone's like, oh. But they both went to really prestigious private high schools. Yes. If you Google the high school I went to, it gets 2.5 stars and says, kids that go to this school test far below national average. It's probably why I say Botan and things like that. So anyway, they're probably like, oh my gosh, we're NYC kids from immigrants. We're doing our thing. We're crushing it. Private high school. Collinford is, Princeton. Guess he's a big hit with the Princeton boys, the New York Times said at the reunions. Hey, Collinford, my man, Princeton. I'm sure they all got sweatshirts. And so Collinford went to Princeton and NYU, and Yarouj went to Fordham, which I looked it up, I think is the 22nd best law school in the country. And so they really, for young adults in New York City, where it's not easy, they really had their ducks in a row. To be young 30s and practicing law, you could really have a good time in this city. And they became friends. From that birthday, because they have such similar paths through law school and then becoming lawyers, you could see why the friendship got stronger, and none of their friends knew about it, but to the point where there possibly even could be a romantic relationship, right? It would make sense if they really liked each other and everything, but who knows? And so they graduate law school. Collinford Mattis, he gets a job at a private firm. Boom, the big bucks, big money, baby, New York City private firm. One of my best friend comedians, his girlfriend she's a lawyer, she works at a big private firm. And he said there's 150 lawyers on this just big sea of cubicles. And I'm like, 150? I must be naive. I wouldn't even think there's enough stuff to look up to keep that many lawyers busy. But I guess, so Collinford, big firm. In the New York Times article about the whole thing, one of his professors said that Collinford kind of seemed like he felt bad for going the big firm, big money route. And I think maybe his scene of people, it was cooler to do this nonprofit or the small. And so he was, I guess, kind of when he told people, yeah, I'm going the big firm route, he felt like he had to explain it by saying, but I'm the first person in my family that, could make this type of money type of thing. And I think the professor was like, you're fine. You don't explain it to me. And so here they are, Collinford Mattis working for the big firm. He actually got laid off right before all this happened because of COVID, but he was already interviewing more. And then we got Yarouge, who she went the other route. She was helping poor tenants in the Bronx against landlords, which in this city, there needs to be lawyers that do that. There are some landlords that just aren't human. I don't know what they are. And a big tactic that they can use is knowing that tenants don't have enough money to go to litigation, and so they can use kind of that. And so to have lawyers that say, no, let's go to litigation, how about that, is just needed. So you got two young lawyers that went to private high schools, went to the best colleges money can buy, are now young, full of potential, living in New York City. Yarouge is, her father sadly passed away in 2012, and her mother, getting on in age, needs a caretaker, and so Yarouge has lived at home and is her mother's primary caretaker. Collinford's mother was a big foster care mother, so when she passed away pretty recently, she asked Collinford, hey, do you mind taking, or I guess she probably didn't say, hey, do you mind? But her last dying wish, I guess, was for Collinford to take over and to raise her 3 foster kids, which he did. And there's letters from friends and colleagues saying, yeah, he went to all their parent-teacher conferences, and he just was doing best by his mother who had passed away. And so they're taking care of people, which I would think that if you're your mom's only caregiver and you got these 3 foster kids, forming a little terror cell together is probably, I think that was a great excuse. Like, if Collinford was like, hey, Yarouge, you want to go out and maybe torch a police van with Molotov cocktail? It's a good excuse to be like, oh, shoot, gang, I can't tonight. I got to take care of my mom, but maybe we could go full domestic terrorist another time or after she passes. That way I have less responsibility. I could take more risks. Also, you got these 3 kids. I don't know. It doesn't seem like the best time. But they, apart from all of their friends, when something like this happens and they, 2 people like this get federal charges and are facing life in prison, all their colleagues and family members and people they went to school with and professors write letters to the judge being like, no, this isn't them. Trust me, you gotta, this isn't them. We had never heard anything like that. We were like Princeton boys together, nothing. But that doesn't mean, that didn't happen. So at some point, these 2 decide, you know what? Our political ideology is perfect. It's right on. Our finger is on the pulse, and let's do this. And so you got to think the plan was May 29th, 2020. The plan was they were going to fill up some Bud Light bottles with gasoline. I always think of the Bud Light. There's a classic picture that came out with Yarouge holding the Molotov cocktail, and you can see the Bud Light logo, and she's got the scarf. And it's the poster picture for this whole thing, but it's the Bud Light is a big part of this case, kind of funny. And I picture the brass at Bud Light looking at the picture of her holding a Molotov cocktail, just all in silence, going, well, it's free advertising, I guess. No publicity is bad publicity. But so on May 29th, while New York City was wrapped up in protests and looting and everything in between, everybody was out there for a whole different reason, it seemed like. Yarouge and Collinford I guess, put their plan into action. And I must have started with Yarouge putting on her now infamous black t-shirt that says, "The struggle continues regardless." And they must have filled up some Bud Light bottles and headed out into the night in Collinford's tan minivan. You gotta think with every bump they hit potholes, the Bud Light bottles are tinking together. They were probably, you gotta think Yarouge is wearing her "The struggle continues regardless" shirt. And they're, smiling and grimacing at each other, thinking, oh man, this is going to be such a powerful Instagram photo that could possibly also be shared on Twitter. They head out into the night. First stop, which I would say, as far as their plan goes, this is probably one of the worst things that they could have done. It's funny, like if you watch a career criminal that only went to, like a blue-collar career criminal that only went to school through the 5th grade, if you watch a documentary or an interview on someone like that, they know exactly, when it comes to their crime or whatever that they do professionally in the crime world, they know exactly what to do. They're like, oh, don't do that. That adds federal charges. Oh, no, if you leave that out, that's 5 years less in jail right there, and it doesn't even really matter. Like they've looked up and they understand exactly down the thing. Like, no, if you just leave that out, that's an extra 8 years. They know exactly. And the lawyers that went to Princeton and the best high schools, they didn't. They just filled up a couple Bud Light bottles with toilet paper and headed out into the night with their fingers crossed. And the first unbelievably stupid, forehead on the table stupid decision that they made was right after midnight. Yarouge did an interview with a journalist where she, the camera's pointing straight at her and she's wearing the black t-shirt that says "The struggle continues regardless." And I feel like that takes on drastically different meaning as the night goes on. But so she's wearing the shirt, she's wearing the same scarf that shows up in all the pictures and footage of her and everything, and she's using her iPhone to emphasize points about how the system is terrible and how it needs to be brought down with violence. And why it's so stupid is if you're getting into the type of life where you're committing acts that carry a punishment of life in prison, that's probably a good time to start just keeping your mouth shut. Don't tell anyone ever. Don't at a bar when you're excited, when you're feeling proud of it. Don't do a interview in the same clothes as you do the. I mean, you didn't even bring a. If you want to do an interview and have that, hey, I'm out here. At least change clothes before you commit the felony that requires a minimum of life in jail. That's just crime 101. And also, almost as if it's a comedy movie, as Yarouge is doing my ideology is perfect and my finger is on the pulse more than everybody else, my iPhone, just as if, like I said, like a comedy movie, it's like Collinford, he's not a part of the interview at all, figures, you know what? I might as well just put myself on camera too, just to be safe. I want to make sure I'm wearing the same exact things that are later in my federal mugshot. So during the interview, Collinford walks by too, just to make sure he's on camera as well, wearing the same clothes with a dumb look on his face. And so that's just after midnight. And I think around like 30 minutes or an hour later, there's 2 police officers standing across the street from the precinct in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. And they claim that at a certain point, a tan minivan pulled up, a female wearing a black t-shirt that says "The struggle continues regardless," gets out, throws a Molotov cocktail in an already destroyed police van. They get back into, she gets back into the minivan and they drive off. Well, I guess the police officers just go, they radioed a couple of their buddies going, yeah, can you pull over the tan police van? And so I cannot imagine what it felt like for those two that have all their ducks in a row. They went all through law school. They had it all figured out. Princeton parties. And they went out thinking this is going to be a night of, social unrest. We're going to create such a powerful image with the fried police van. And all of a sudden, it must have gotten real. Just looking up, Also, too, is like, why would you use a Molotov cocktail? It's such an unstable, whatever, you would call it, way to do it. The chances you're going to burn yourself or one of your friends is way better than that you're going to use it to bring down the United States government. And also, there's a bunch of Molotov cocktail, there's a bunch of Bud Light bottles and toilet paper. There's no hiding any of that or arguing it's something else. I was kind of laughing when they finally were pulled over. Like, imagine seeing those lights. That's like the one time where you would want to sell it as just a DUI case. Like the cop walks up with his flashlight and shines down and goes, "Are those Molotov cocktail making supplies?" You go, "No, officer, no. Nope, I'm hammered. I drank 16 beers before I drove. Just your classic DUI case. You caught me. Let's get it started. I surrender." But so they got Bud Light bottles and toilet paper and gasoline. I was thinking maybe if they would have just brought in one, if they would have not done the interview where they put their face and clothes and everything on and said that they want to violently bring down the man, if they would have then changed their clothes, only had one Molotov cocktail, didn't have the van full of evidence and didn't do it right in front of the police. I mean, how crappy of an idea and plan. And they're lawyers, they're not. And so they were pulled over, quickly arrested, and then the next time you see them is the mug shots where they're standing next to each other, and they look bummed, and they look scared. So then they're in federal custody, same jail that Ghislaine is currently in, allegedly. And then they were out on bail. Here's what they were charged with. Arson, conspiracy, not good. Use of destructive device, civil disorder, making or possessing a destructive device, and this is the kicker, the use of explosives during a crime of violence, the old 924C. Which carries a minimum sentence of 30 years. 30 years. And so at first their bail was denied, and then it was reinstated, and I guess they paid it and were out on bail or bond. And then the prosecution argued that shouldn't have happened, and the bond got revoked, and they were picked up and brought back to the jail where Ghislaine is. And then eventually they were given bond again and are now home awaiting trial. I mean, can you imagine what that feels like? And all their friends, like I said, all their friends and colleagues are writing frantically into the judge, being like, "No, your Rouge has always loved the American system, and she works within it, and we've always talked about how great it is." And Collinford's friends are writing in, being like, I've never heard him talk like that before. We were like we were private high school dudes. That was not the way that we were, that we acted. And so it's like all of the friends and everyone writing in to be like, no, they just work. It was like a little eruption of anger. And you got to think the federal prosecutors are arguing like, okay, well, that's all right. It's all well and good, little eruption of anger, the times, it was wild times, but just with the severity and how stupid, these idiots we're supposed to believe these two idiots have it figured out, just driving around like unstable with Molotov cocktails. Personally, I think I watched enough mafia movies growing up that it's like, come on, like if you want to do a crime, do it clean and quiet, have a little precision. Yarouge and Collinford are like the two coked out, unstable gangsters in the mafia movie that gets everybody caught, It's just like, how stupid could you be just to go full with where your life was just for one night? You go, hey, let's play, Terror Cell in order to create a powerful image for a social media site. Like, that's really all I can think that torching a police van does. One of my many long walks during COVID, I just wander around Queens and Brooklyn randomly. I was just walking. I didn't even really pay attention where I was going. I turned the corner and I found where the NYPD parks all of their police vans, like the one that they blew up. And it was a big, tall chain link fence with barbed wire on the top. And as far as the eye could see, I was like squinting all the way down, and it's just row after row, endless row after endless row of these police vans. And so that even made it more stupid. It's like you did nothing. You didn't bring down, they don't care about these vans. They probably thought like, oh, that they burned a police van and the fire department has to come put it out, and then they just replace it with a new van off this lot. To put your fate in the hands of the feds for one police van is just not a smart move. And so you got to think their lawyer is really going to have to get rid of that 924C, the use of explosives during a crime of violence. Their lawyer's going to have to mainline coffee in both arms while furiously reading two different law books with both eyes. Just, we got to get it out. And the tone that their lawyers are taking, they're not arguing, because the prosecution has said this is an open and shut case. They were filmed by the cameras on the police precinct. The cops across the street saw them. They were wearing the same clothes on the iPhone Emphasis interview an hour before. Collinford walked by in the same clothes. There's a bunch of Bud Light and toilet paper in the van. And so there's not really any arguing that they didn't do it. It doesn't sound like. And so like Yarouge's lawyer has a quote where she said, "This is lawless. This was lawless. This was destructive. But, it was just a little eruption of anger." And you got to think they're going to plead with that tone. I think they're going to plead down, and I would say they'll probably be able to plead that big one off, right? But still, what a way to just add unimaginable stress to your life. It's just one night where you're like, my finger's on the pulse, I'm going big. And so, like most every other case during the COVID-19 time, it's just in indefinite pretrial hell. So whenever something does happen with this one, which I think it's interesting, it's not like a lot of them that we see. When something does happen with this one, we'll be all ready, and I will report on it, and it'll be great. And I'm going to cut it off there. I love you all. I'll see you soon. Remember, the struggle continues regardless. Why? Steven Y. Schmida.